Chair, we are now recording.
And let me call to order the Police Accountability Regular Meeting for board for Wednesday, June 10th. And let me do the public notice. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on the rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 826-5339-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chichinyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shaw Mountain, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use of and occupation of this unceded, stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but we also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. Which brings me to agenda item number 1, call to order. Roll call.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. For the record, this meeting was called to order at 6:31 p.m. I will now start with item number 2, which is administering the oath of office and confidentiality to our new board member, who is David Williams, representing District 2, and nominated by Councilmember Taplin. So, Board Member Williams, if you could please stand. Sorry, there's some audio contamination. Okay, so if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, David Williams, do solemnly swear or affirm.
I, David Williams, do solemnly swear or affirm.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies.
The Constitution of the State of California against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States.
And I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
The Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I take this
obligation freely,
without
any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And I will well and faithfully discharge. The duties upon which I'm about to enter. I further swear or affirm. That I will abide by. And maintain the confidentiality. Of the personnel files of sworn employees. Of the police department. And all other matters. That are confidential pursuant to state and federal law. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations and welcome. And this will now move us into agenda item 2, approval of the agenda. Is there any changes, additions, things that need to be moved or clarified? Now is the time. And before we get into the, I'm sorry, Jose, you want to interrupt me?
May we please do a roll call?
Oh, I got so excited by our new member, I just kept running, of course.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Chair Moore.
I'm present.
Present, and he's participating remotely on a just cause provision. Vice Chair Wilson,
Present.
Board Member Blackerby,
Present.
Board Member Calavita,
Here.
Board Member Cayetano,
Here.
Board Member Leftwich,
Here.
Board Member Moses,
Here.
and Board Member Williams.
Here.
On behalf of ODPA staff, we have Investigator Wechter, Investigator Gordon, and myself. Policy Analyst Murillo, Director Aguilar couldn't join us today. On behalf of the BPD, I do see that we have Deputy Chief Tate, Policy Analyst Malberg, and Sergeant Edwards joining us today. On behalf of the City Attorney's, on behalf of the City Attorney's Office, I do see DCA Mattis joining us. On behalf of the City Manager's Office, we have Dr. Arlondo and DI Officer Brown. With that, Chair, you may proceed. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. And that gets me the chance to rewind and start this over. Agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. Is there any changes, additions, substitutions, or clarifications we need to make? Now is the time. Not seeing her. Jose, I'm gonna lean on you. Can you see or hear any objections?
Could I get a motion to approve?
I move to accept the agenda.
Oh,
I'll second.
okay.
All right. Okay. We missed you, Board Member Calvita.
You missed me? Oh.
I did.
Thank you, Chair. All right. Okay, with the agenda now approved, we can now proceed to item 5, public comment. Again, apologies for the numbering on the agenda today. We did add that, so it did throw off the numbering quite slightly. But as always, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, we will start with those physically present first before moving on to virtual speakers. At this time, is there anyone that would like to provide public comment?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. So,
And I'm sorry, could we just make sure that your mic is on? If someone, thank you. Perfect.
so does this include, anything that's on the agenda, or we don't wait till that item comes up? So I wanted to comment briefly on the texting allegations, draft report. It's great, shows tremendous amount of work and, under very trying circumstances over a long period of time, and it's very, very, long awaited by community members. And I think it's very well written. I want to point out one aspect of the recommendations that I think is extremely important, and then I want to ask, I want to point out something I think is maybe not in here, unless, I haven't read every single word, perhaps I'm missing it. For those dialing in from home, on page 5, which is also page 8, we'll call it page 5. These are the recommendations, so that's where I always go first. I think that the further recommendation to pass an ordinance to allow the PAB to conduct investigations of potential misconduct sua sponte, which is, I believe, at its own initiative or volition, and to access internal records in furtherance of those investigations, that should be allowed. I think it's a correct and important outcome of this long delayed report. I think it should not be necessary because it is right there in the charter amendment. That concerns me. Why do we need an ordinance to implement what's right there in the charter and was all understood by everybody from the beginning? But if this will help, that's great. At the same time, that question still remains. Why do we need an implementing ordinance to say what it actually says? So I think it's going to require more than an ordinance. It's one of those things where I think the report says elsewhere, policy is only as good as the will to enforce the policy. And that's true like everywhere, universally. So I think that demands also of the council that they enforce the ordinance as well as the charter, and of the community that they hold the council to that account. There's really no one else that can make that happen. Then my concern is One of the imperatives of the investigation, which is, I forget where, it is, can you actually point me to that page number? There's like, what the assumptions of the, what the assumptions of the charge of the investigation overall was. At any rate, if you can find that, I can quote from it, but essentially, we need to know more. And I understand what you're hampered by with the city attorney's, directions and so forth. But we need to know more about beyond just the team, beyond just the one team.
Yeah.
That was always the question. Where else is this? I'll try to wrap up. Where else was this? Where else is there texting? Is it really confined to those 7 or 8 individuals? And where else is the problem of not, if you feel comfortable enough putting this really explosive stuff in a text, you must feel comfortable that nobody is going to find out or nobody's going to care. So really, what is the deal? Like, and where up the chain of command did this go? I'm not satisfied with the answers that we've gotten here. And I want to know, like, in the process of your conversations, I assume you had extensive conversations with leaders. And I know that they said, oh, well, we don't have any other texts to show you, but,
we're just
also, but in your conversations with, say, the chief and the captains, you must have found something out about what, did they just stonewall you and say, no, we never knew anything, there was nothing we could do? That would probably be good to say more explicitly if that's what you heard, but to me, that's unbelievable. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. 3 minutes on the clock.
Actually, Margot Smith is going to cede her time to me.
No.
Oh, you're gonna have your own time?
No, I'm not here for comment.
I know, but can I use your 3 minutes then?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. My name is Ilana Auerbach. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. First, I want to say thank you, Board Member Calavita, Chair Moore, and whoever else was on this team that was so patient and so persistent and resilient. And yes, I agree with George Littman that we need more. Of course, we need more. And this is a great first start. And thank you for your efforts. I would like to read into the record the press release that Berkeley Cop Watch released today. I don't know, did any of y'all receive this today? Okay, well, I'll get it to you. Okay, so I'm reading it. For immediate release, July 10th, 2024, Berkeley Cop Watch responds to Police Accountability Board report on racist texts and arrest quotas. Berkeley Cop Watch welcomes the final report of the Police Accountability Board on the TextGate scandal. It is disturbing that almost 2 years have passed since former Berkeley police officer Corey Shadowdy leaked racist text messages from the BPD bike force and revealed that arrest quotas were being used that targeted poor people and people of color. Predatory policing in Berkeley has resulted in too many unlawful and unjust arrests, a crisis that deserves urgent action. It is outrageous that the BPD was allowed to deny you all access to crucial information for so long. Foot dragging, denial, and delay have become the norm at your department, sir, with all due respect. These tactics are intended to make PAB findings dated, potentially irrelevant, and are often eclipsed by fresher scandals. Non-cooperation by Chief Lewis and other BPD leadership provides BPD with a shield for their abuse and misconduct that must be challenged. Chief Lewis is responsible for ensuring cooperation with the PAB, and that information is disclosed in a timely manner. She has failed to do that in general, and in this case specifically, and I now quote from the report, page 28. However, policy reforms are only meaningful to the extent that they are fully understood, implemented, and robustly enforced. The PAB thus recommends as a key priority that the City Council enact an ordinance or other mechanism to ensure that this oversight body, which has sworn an oath of confidentiality, has the authority to access internal BPD records in the interest of preventing such damaging practices in the future. CopWatch supports this recommendation. However, it is clear that the chief lacks the will to cooperate with our elected system of oversight. It has been proven repeatedly that the BPD has no intention of genuine cooperation with civilian efforts to control its functioning. Another quote from page 25 of the report. It should be noted further that the inability of this oversight body to provide oversight of daily BPD practices limits its ability to prevent or forestall the kinds of misconduct that went undisclosed for more than 2 years before being exposed by an individual who was no longer part of the police force. In addition, the city attorney appears to be trying to usurp and control the powers of the PAB. This is from report page 9. According to the city attorney's interpretation of a charter amendment relating to PAB powers and duties, we were required to limit our investigation to an inquiry into relevant policies and practices and to recommend reforms as appropriate. It is unacceptable that the PAB is not allowed to initiate its own investigations when it becomes aware of egregious allegations of misconduct. This oversight in the enabling legislation must be remedied by the city council immediately. If the council and the BPD were sincerely concerned about addressing the threat of problem officers, for example, racist, violent, abusive, there would already have been a system of early warning established. As CopWatch has demonstrated, a careful look at publicly available data can help to identify officers with a problematic history. Sadly, we fully expect that BPD will further delay committing to a routine analysis of its information as it continues to put the department's public image above public safety. Much of the statistical information detailing racial profiling and unnecessary arrests provided in this report was already made known when Berkeley CopWatch published its own report on the scandal in January 2024 called Purging the Poor, which we shared with the PAB. Berkeley CopWatch did a major Public Records Act request for arrest data from 2018 to 2023 from both BPD and the District Attorney's Office. This information was also shared with the PAB. The PAB's findings help us understand the depth and breadth of misconduct within the BPD since the scandal broke in November 2022. We encourage the PAB to let the people of Berkeley know the challenges that are confronting our voter-supported system of police accountability. Please tell us when you need us to speak up and demand response. The members of the PAB who worked on this report deserve praise. The problems identified demand immediate attention from Berkeley's elected leaders, or else the revised mechanism of police accountability will represent yet another betrayal of the public trust. The PAB has worked diligently within the constraints of their mission to hold the BPD accountable through policy remedies. CopWatch continues to affirm urgent need for new public safety solutions outside of policing, unconstrained by the laws and practices that have made police so resistant to democratic and anti-racist reforms. I'm going to need just another minute. I have one more paragraph, if I may. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Cheryl Owens, who initially led this investigation, resigned from the PAB the day after interim chief Lewis was promoted to permanent chief last May 2023. Before tendering her resignation, Owens said, and I quote, "There is no collaboration on any front in this city, nor do I believe there's a commitment to civilian oversight by the city manager, the city attorney, or the chief of police. When the PAB and the police chief disagree on a complaint finding, the city manager always sides with the chief. I don't trust the city manager to give much weight to findings from the investigations into the text allegations if there are findings against the police department staff or the chief. We agree with former Commissioner Owens. Berkeley's struggle for justice and police accountability continues. And I am optimistic, and with a new city manager, and this is me speaking, I think, and we will push, and we need everybody to get behind the council passing actual, so that you have actual teeth and power, and so that we do oversee our police department, which has a history of racism. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other physically present public comment at this time? Okay, thank you. With that said, I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. Just one moment while I get this reset. Okay. Kit Sajanor, you have been granted permission to speak.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for making this meeting available through Zoom. I had intended to be there in person, but my, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I got this message saying it looks like I'm done talking, but I intended to be there in person, but my spouse has COVID now, and I don't feel too well either. So you really don't want me there. I was hoping that if there's going to be a presentation on the report, that there might be an opportunity to address public comment to the report at that time. Is that going to be the case, or is this my only chance after I've heard the presentation?
Sorry, we're not answering the questions of public comment, but we're more than happy to address your question through a communication.
Is there going to be a public comment period when after the presentation of this item was my question?
Chair Moore? Sorry, Chair, you're muted.
Yes, but Ms. Saganor, we can't have a conversation about this now. We can't communicate to you by written correspondence like right now.
I thought you could answer a procedural issue about whether there's going to be another comment period.
Simply asking if we're gonna have a separate public comment.
Yes, that's my
period
question.
After presentation of the report, and I think the answer is no.
Okay, great.
But-
Thank you for clarifying for that for me. I will send you some specific suggestions in writing at this point about various things that were in it. But in general, it's a great great report. I'm glad it's going to go forward to the city council. I hope that everybody on the PAB will vote to recommend that it go forward to the city council and that the city council pays it good heed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Zipporah Collins. You have been granted permission to speak. Just one moment while I reset the timer. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm Zipporah Collins. I've been a Berkeley resident since 1962, and I was very concerned by the texting allegations. I spent the afternoon reading the report and recommendations and found it thorough, well-considered, and wise. The subcommittee presented a clear picture of what had happened with specific evidence. It was they thought carefully about what policy and practice changes might best prevent the misconduct in the future. They explained that unless officers are not held accountable for misconduct, it can spread to other officers. And they gave specific wording for policy and practice amendments to recommend to the department and the city council. I think it's important for the PAB to get requested information from the police department and city administration to do its job. And I hope the Berkeley Police Department can develop a culture in which officers understand that misconduct by one or more officers reflects badly on all of them and impairs the other officers' good faith efforts to have the respect and confidence of the community, which is so helpful in solving crimes and finding who true criminals are. I urge the board to accept the report presented to the city council and advocate persistently to have the recommendations accepted and implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the speaker who identifies himself as virtual meetings, you have been given permission to speak. I'll just reset the timer. You are now.
I don't know why my video is not coming on. My name is Wendy Alfson. I'm a resident of Berkeley for more than 30 years and have previously talked with you. In particular here tonight on terms of the military equipment report item on the agenda to speak in favor of the recommendation to ask council to require or to have the department agree to sponsor a community meeting at which questions can be answered, and to point out that although it's great that it's on the PAB agenda tonight, that this does not quite constitute a community engagement meeting in which there can be questions and answers, because I can't ask the department anything they can't answer. And that I just wanted to kind of note that I saw in the report that they characterized a difference that the city report requires deployment and use, and there seemed to be an assumption that the state law that use excludes deployment. And I believe that deployment is a part of the definition of use of a gun. It was and therefore that's an artificial distinction between the city reporting and the state reporting, and that you should require that the state reporting also include all deployments. There was a distinction made between deployment versus display, carrying in the car as a part of the regular outfitting, not having to be written up, but that anytime there's any apparent display of force, that that should be included, and it is included in the city ordinance, and that would bring them more parallel. I just also would concur in the comments that have previously been raised this evening in terms of recommending that the recommendations move forward for the policy changes as recommended. I hope the board will adopt the recommendations of each of the other work group subcommittees coming before you on the Public Record Act matter with the CHP and with the texting racist language and behavior matters that do require. Thank you.
Thank you. The speaker, Emric Pulotny, or Pulotnik, I mean, you have been granted permission to speak. Whenever you're ready, the 30 minutes are on the timer.
Yes, thank you. I haven't been able to participate with the PAB for a while. I'm glad that its ranks have gotten back almost pretty much to what it should be. And everything I was going to say has been said. I agree with all the speakers. So I'll just say that having the new city manager is a hopeful development for getting further with all the efforts of the PAB. So I just want to express support and hope that you will keep community groups informed, and when you need us to make a clamor or support you in any way, to call on us, because it's a good moment in time to have hope that we can move forward with making the PAB what it was meant to be, and not having the kind of undermining and resistance that we've unfortunately been dealing with. So keep up the good work, and thank you for the hard work.
Thank you. Moni Law, you have been granted permission to speak.
I'm present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry that I was here in the back row and didn't realize you closed off the comment to people in person. So if I may, with your permission, this is a very low mic. I'm going to stand over like this. Sit down, maybe. And it's a 2-minute maximum or 3-minute maximum. Oh, I see what's happening. Now I feel like a little kid. Bigger table here. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Moni Law. I'm here in my personal capacity as a resident of Berkeley, UC Berkeley graduate of 1982, USF Law School 1986, and also the plaintiff in a case called Law versus City of Berkeley, where as a result of that case during Black Lives Matter protest, where I was struck in the back, flashbangs thrown at my feet, others were injured as well. There was an adoption of new measures, and one of which we're very happy to see your group here today, this organization now being the Police Accountability Board, brings some hope. I just wanted to say this is a long report to read and just received it yesterday, so I've not read it all. What I have read, I'm hopeful and I'm thankful, and I do hope that the work is meaningful and absolutely concrete. We met, when I say we, I mean a few of us, Pastor Michael McBride, Pastor Michael Smith and I met with the police department over a year ago, I guess it was, after the text scandal broke, and promises were made and there was little to no follow-up. So I do hope all of these things are adopted. The mayor appointed me to the Fair and Impartial Policing Work Group. And at that time, one of the things I really noticed was social media and the power that it had, and recommended that they have a social media policy and that they do a social media scrub on all incoming officers and on an ongoing basis. So I'm glad that that's listed here. I saw something referencing that. And finally, I want to make sure, where's my clock? Okay, that any of the follow-up for the early warning system that has been advocated a number of times for a long period of time. Jim Channon, an attorney who does a lot of training for police departments around the state. My attorney, Rachel Lederman, also provides training around the state. And they said a real key part of keeping an accountable police department is the early warning system. So I do encourage you to do that. Finally, the racist text scandal in other cities and police departments has resulted in criminal prosecutions by a former member of this board, when it was formerly the Police Review Commission, is now the federal officer in the Department of Justice who brought charges against such officers. Those are personal to me when I hear people calling us names and demeaning people. My friends and neighbors who are unhoused, my Black brothers and sisters and myself, we don't feel safe when we know people are texting about us in the ways in which they did. So not feeling safe is the exact opposite of the serve and protect duty of an officer, correct? My mother was the associate warden for a criminal institution in the state of California. I have a number of law enforcement members in my family who I appreciate what they attempt to do, but we're not doing what we should, particularly for Berkeley values. And that's inclusivity, respect, and we are not certainly getting that from the racist text scandal that I hope you will take all action to correct and actually have some action against those officers and ensure it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more speaker, Julie Dickey. Okay, I've been granted permission to speak.
Thank you. I'm a 24-year resident of Berkeley, and I was so excited when the Police Accountability Board was set up. And I just think they've done wonderful work. And I'm so sorry that they had to go to so much work to get this report out. Thank you, PAB, for getting this report out. And we all have to express support for Berkeley to make the policy changes recommended in it. I was hoping that this meeting would have an actual discussion of the report, but perhaps that will come later. And in the meantime, I just wanted to congratulate the PAB and urge the city of Berkeley to move on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, with that, we have no additional hands raised. Chair, I believe you're muted.
Of course I am. That would have been too easy. So with me unmuted and ready to go, that takes us to agenda item number 6, which is approval of the minutes from regular meeting June 26, 2024. Which, you know, I always look to you first. How are we looking?
CC is looking to me. They look fine to me. I move that they be approved.
Excellent.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll go with the roll call vote. Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavia,
Well, I wasn't here, so I abstained.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Also abstained.
Board Member Williams,
I abstain.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Okay. And so, Jose, I'm going to hand the meeting over to you as agenda item number 7. This is the ODPA staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Our staff report tonight will be fairly brief. As I mentioned earlier at the start of the meeting, Director Aguilar isn't here today, so we'll be providing some brief remarks. First, I'll give it off to Investigator Horton to just provide us with a quick overview of the training that the investigative division has been doing.
Over the course of the last 2 weeks, the investigative division has gone through the data law group's internal affairs and investigative certification. That was a month-long training starting the month of June. Both investigative director and I have been certified, and so has Director Aguilar. We also received training on human factors and use of force investigation. Specifically, we received that this week, also from the data law group.
Thank you, Investigator Horton. Just three brief additional updates, or rather 2, my apologies. The first is that after our last meeting, we did connect with Board Member Cayetano, Board Member Blackaby, to discuss the presentation of the triennial report at the Hope Center. We had a discussion about what factors we want to include in that presentation, and overall narrowed it down to a few topics that we would really think would better benefit presentation to that specific group of community members. The second item that I have is on the council agenda, and this is regarding our new space. The Agenda and Rules Committee the other day approved the agenda with our item for the lease. So if everything goes as planned, we should be able to move into our new space by the end of August, early September, which I know has been a lot long in the works. Before I move on to any questions, I'll go ahead to our colleagues at the city manager's office for any announcements.
Thank you very much. No comments at this time on my end for reimagining public safety, but I want to give my colleague Rex Brown an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. No comment.
Does the board have any questions for us? If we don't have an answer to it now, we'll make sure that the director receives the question.
Real quickly, just because I've asked, update on civil timing.
So we have gone, and this one I actually have. So we have gone live with our civil website. We're just making a few adjustments on our city side of the website to make sure that we can incorporate the link in a way that's accessible. For the members of the public that may not be aware what civil is our new case management system, which makes filing complaints, commendations, or policy reviews a lot more accessible to members of the public. So again, our new administrative analyst, Melanie Beasley, and I are actually working on restructuring our website pages so that they're a bit easier to find and that link is accessible.
Right, because I think, yeah, the main, it'll be useful to make sure that people are directed there to make a complaint and not have to go through an older antiquated process that can use civil directly. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I'll hand it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And so With that, that takes us to the chair report and the board members. I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I want to again thank everyone for being present and active, and the work that has gone into the last 3 months has been nothing but monumental, with the triennial report, with the Downtown Bike Task Force, with working on our engagements, building out what looks to be the future of the board. I'm just very excited and wanted to say thank you all for your work. At the same time, I wanted to also welcome our new board member, David Williams, nominated by Terry Taplin to join us in the work that we do. I'm going to get you now while you're in a good mood and you're fresh and say thank you. And I am so excited that you're joining us in this work. And as soon as we can get him on as many subcommittees as possible, let me know. That being said, and all jokes aside, thank you for your service. At this time, Board Member Williams, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the board and say a few words, I would love to hear from you.
Hi, my name is David Williams. I'm a resident of Berkeley. I've been through Berkeley schools part of my life, St. Joseph's as a child and St. Mary's for high school. So it's kind of feels good to be back home, so to speak, well-rounded. And I'm just excited to be here. Don't have a ton to say as it being my first day, but I do know that the work that is being done at the PAB is very important. And it's my intent to bring a valid, fair, and biased perspective to the board. So thank you for welcoming.
Thank you. Well said. And at that, I'm going to open it up to any other board members who'd like to say anything at this time. I'm going to give you the floor. Please take it. Anyone? All right.
Welcome. Good to have you.
I'm sorry, one more time.
I was welcoming our new board member.
Awesome. Perfect timing. Well, if there's nothing from any board members left, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deputy Chief Tate for agenda item number 9. Deputy Chief.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to share first and foremost that starting this Friday, Chief Lewis will be on vacation for several weeks. I'll be acting chief until she returns from her much deserved vacation. Also wanted to confirm that we saw the report regarding the task force and bike unit investigation that was printed in the agenda for tonight. We want to determine whether or not this is the final draft or if something more formally will be provided to BPD for review. I don't know if you have that answer right now. Ultimately, once we have the final version of the report, we can start reviewing the findings. We continue to have very productive meetings with members of the policy subcommittee working on the Lexipol pursuit policy. We had one today. We certainly appreciate the time and collaboration that's been spent as we go through our ideas about the very important language for this policy. Topic of interest that I wanted to share that occurred today was our Community Services Bureau and property crimes detectives met with a local business that has several locations within Berkeley. The meeting was about ongoing and multiple retail thefts that their locations have been experiencing. Our property crimes detectives were able to get a firsthand account of the size and scope of the problem that they'd been experiencing, and direct contact information was shared between everyone to better equip the local businesses, our Community Services Bureau, as well as our property crimes detectives with more efficient and timely information. And once we learned about the scope of the retail theft problem that they were experiencing, the police department stressed the importance of the accurate, timely reporting of crimes to better reflect the problem, as well as to inform the direction of police resources. Ultimately, the meeting was very productive in terms of sharing information and strategies to address retail theft. And this is another area where our Community Services Bureau has connected with members of the community directly with the police resources for a productive, collaborative approach to solving a community problem that has seriously affected multiple areas within our region. As a department, we're going to continue to look for opportunities such as this to build strong relationships and information sharing. And then with me today is Arla Malmberg. You remember that during our meeting last time, we discussed the establishment of the Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability, or the OSPA. And you asked if you could have a brief presentation regarding the work of the OSPA. So Arla will be the manager assigned to lead this team. And he's here tonight to provide you a brief overview of the work for his new office and take a moment to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. Arla?
Thank you, Deputy Chief, and good evening, everybody. I'm Arlo Malmberg, Strategic Planning and Accountability Manager for the PD. I'm glad to have a few moments with you to give an overview of the newly formed office and talk a bit about how some of the work we'll be doing might intersect with this group and your mission, and really open the door to further discussion on what that collaboration might look like. So the OSPA is a newly formed office, as you know, in the department, currently consisting of myself, as well as our crime analyst, and we anticipate onboarding an additional analyst in the next couple of months. And our mission is to support the development of policies and strategies that promote equity, efficiency, and effectiveness in all of our public safety efforts. And what this looks like in practice is a consolidation of a lot of work that has already been happening in the department. And like I said, we're adding an additional employee, so that will give us some added capacity to build out new tools and efficiencies in our efforts. But I kind of want to break it down by our title, Strategic Planning and Accountability. So in terms of strategic planning, we're really focusing on a few key areas. We're working on providing data-driven, evidence-based, and problem-oriented insights to help develop effective policing strategies, both in terms of providing public safety and doing so in an equitable way. We're also looking at ways to optimize how we allocate resources and deploy those resources, and we're doing what we can to facilitate collaboration with other departments and initiatives in the city like Vision Zero, as well as our gun violence intervention and prevention program. And we're also looking to collaborate with facilitate collaboration with other agencies in the region. And of course, we're doing traditional crime analysis work, supporting our detectives and operations on individual cases and crime series. On the accountability side, we're doing a few things like carrying out and strengthening our inspection and audit protocols. And that's an example of a role that we've absorbed from elsewhere. Previously, a sergeant was doing that work. And within that falls the management of our early intervention system, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And we're assisting the policy sergeant when appropriate, and especially when data can be brought to bear on policy questions. And I also include in the accountability bucket all of the transparency work we do, so maintaining and growing the Transparency Hub, producing our annual report and other regular public reports, responding to certain PRAs and so on. So hopefully that gives you a high level yet a concrete view of what we will be getting up to in the OSPA. And I also want to touch on how our office relates to the Police Accountability Board. We see our roles as distinct, but certainly complementary. As you just heard, our focus is really on internal strategies and decision-making and performance management within the department. So we're not an internal oversight body. Our work is not tied to disciplinary mechanisms. A lot of our day-to-day work doesn't directly involve the PAB, but we're definitely here to be in conversation with your efforts, with data and insights when needed. So I mentioned the early intervention system earlier, and I think it's a great example of how we're already collaborating. We're currently working with board member Cayetano on an RFP, a request for proposals to bring the best possible EIS platform to the department. And so this is a joint effort. It's really exciting because it ensures we'll implement a system that meets department needs, community expectations, and the PAB's expectations. So it's a great example of how our offices can combine expertise to enhance accountability and transparency. So looking forward, I'm sure we will find additional opportunities for collaboration. I'd love to continue some of the discussions that we've already had around data and analysis, and explore how we can share insights to support our respective roles. So I am excited to continue working together, and I recognize that there will be areas where our needs and expectations might differ. But at the end of the day, I truly believe we have a shared goal, and that is to enhance public safety and strengthen community trust through partnership. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing with the OSPA and how I see our role. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm sorry, I would have been more prepared. I didn't know you were presenting today. And I do have a few questions for you. When you say equity and efficiency, are you talking from a financial perspective? Are you talking about from a human resource perspective? Can you define what equity means to you?
Well, yeah, equity means that we're, yeah, absolutely. To me, it means that we're meeting the needs of our community members, of all of our community members. So we know that there are communities that that feel or that experience different levels of public safety and crime in their neighborhoods, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those issues very efficiently, so that we're minimizing any potential negative consequences to the community. So
those goals are community driven. Those are community based. It's when you say equity and efficiency, we're not talking about economic models. We're talking about from a community perspective.
Absolutely, community perspective, but also I anticipate the office is we're going to be working on making sure that we're optimizing our resources, the use of our resources efficiently as well. And so, you know, we understand that we're in a moment of crunch staffing, and so that makes making sure that we get optimal value out of each officer resource that we have. So figuring out how to deploy those resources in a way that that maximizes that public safety value is part of that for sure.
Thank you. And when I have a few more for you, I hope you don't mind. And when you're talking about we're aligned in our goals, and I do believe that, but then you also said that there's some ways where we won't be aligned. Where do you see those, and how do you see that working out? Because that's going to be of the most interest to us. Is how if we can't work together, what does that look like? I'm sure we can in some ways, but where's the can'ts?
Absolutely. I mean, I mostly mean that in terms of sort of the logistics of it, or the timing of how that collaboration looks. You know, I know that, for example, in our work on the EIS project, that there's a big desire to see that implemented as soon as possible, and we share that desire, but we absolutely want to make sure that we're you know, following city protocols and ticking every box to make sure that we're doing things on our end to make sure that it's successful in a kind of in a bureaucratic sense. So I'm acknowledging that we might be coming at some of these questions from different perspectives, just on process as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to open it up to a couple of the other, or to anyone of the board members who'd like to, but I have a few more to ask after we're done. Anybody else have questions?
Board Member Loveridge?
Yes, I have a question. I was pleased to hear that you're going to be doing data work and policy related work. And I'm just wondering, from a process perspective, how we would go about seeking your assistance. This has come up with the vehicle pursuit policy. And I don't know, maybe this is a question for you, Deputy Chief Tate, but what is the process for connecting with those services?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the work that PAB does with our policy team, that process won't change. But I will be available to those conversations to support with any data analysis needs. So I think, and Deputy Chief can chime in here if I'm missing something, but if there's a data analysis need from the department side that comes about out of those policy conversations that you're having, that you feel free to reach out to me directly, and also mention it to the contact at the PD that you're working with. And
That
they
was
can
my question, whether
loop
it's
me in.
appropriate to reach out to you directly, if that's okay, or if we need to.
Yeah, please do. No, please do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll coordinate with folks on our end too.
Thanks.
Board Member Moses?
Just sort of expanding on that point, I know that Arlo, you and I connected on the annual report around the racial disparities in policing question. I wonder if it would be appropriate for us to basically work a little more openly on our data processes and data integrity to make sure that we, as a board, understand the methodologies that you're taking, and I think it could be as simple as providing us that sort of walkthrough of your methodologies ahead of the annual report to just clear up any understanding, clarifications of where the data is coming from. Does that work?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's an excellent example of how we can work together and bring our expertise together in this work. And it's something I've also I offer to ODPA staff, and Analyst Murillo can attest that I'm always open to share notes on data analysis. That's something I'm more than happy to do.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes, one of the things that we've been grappling with is trying to identify metrics or benchmarks to compare BPD performance against. And specifically, I'm referring to other comparable jurisdictions. And I know that's something that also came up, I believe, in our budget work. And we learned that there haven't necessarily been an official set of jurisdictions that the department needs to compare its own performance to, say on clearance rates, for example. Is that something that your office is going to be tasked with doing, or just maybe you could talk a little bit about benchmarking or performance measurement and how you might be undertaking that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not easy to find a perfect comp to Berkeley. We did a little bit of that in the annual report and put up some numbers from some similarly sized departments in the region. And there'll be some of that as well in the upcoming Citygate staffing analysis. So that's something that I'm really interested in. I don't think we'll ever find like the perfect comparison agency to Berkeley, but we can present a range of what I think are reasonable cities to compare our statistics to, and kind of have a conversation around some of the specific circumstances that lead to differences in those numbers.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions for Deputy Chief Tate, but I'll save until the end to finish with Arlo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just, it's not so much of a question as a comment. I just wanted to congratulate you on your promotion. And I was especially happy to hear that you were promoted. I think that we worked well together on the early intervention system. And I think I was also happy because when I heard about the creation of the OSPA, I had like two reactions, and I think both of them are reasonable. One is that, well, this could be, an attempt to undermine the work of the board. And I think that fear is justified because of what, we've read in the Downtown Task Force report that's been produced. But I also think that my other reaction, which is also reasonable and justified, is that there's an opportunity for synergies between the OSPA and the board. And I think that you're the right person to produce those synergies. So I'm happy that you're there. And I think that what the factors that will go into making sure that our offices are complementary are like understanding who is setting your agenda, your prioritization, how available are you to us, how responsive are you to us. So I think going forward, it will be a matter of establishing some
lines of communication and openness to both of our agendas. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for those comments, and I agree. This is a new office, so we have a vision for the work that's going to occur here, and but very much understand that we're at the beginning of this exact conversation of figuring out exactly how we can produce those synergies and work collaboratively together.
Any other questions?
Just going back to the deputy chief's comments, I thought that we did provide the report in advance on Friday, right? And so this is the final report unless the board makes changes today. They've received.
That is correct.
Okay.
Do you happen to know where and who it was shared with?
Should have been to both chief and yourself, as well as the city manager's office.
We'll take a look through our email again. As far as my understanding was our first receipt of it or awareness of it was attached to the agenda. We'll take a look to make sure that there wasn't an oversight there.
Chief, two quick, not quick, questions for you as I've been hearing from folks in the community. One is, I know there's a spate of like bike jackings on Grizzly Peak between Berkeley and Oakland and Skyline. At some point 9 months ago, there was like some press coverage about that. I haven't heard much. Is that abated? Is that still an issue? Is that something people are concerned about? So a few people have been talking about that. Bike jackings of like cyclists up along, anyway, if you don't have info on it, that's totally fine. I'd be happy to take that back, but there was some press and as I've been talking to folks, some people have asked questions about that. Second kind of broader question is, do you have any kind of updates generally on the deployment of the cameras, both the fixed and also ALPRs in terms of timing and how that's rolling out? I'm just curious about how that is proceeding.
So we got some good news in that the permitting process for our cameras, at least in the public right of way, it sounds like the permits are going through, which it was really just work being done between various departments within the city as well as the vendor. So it sounds like we have movement. I would hope that by our next meeting, I could give you a better timeline for what that looks like. I think we're in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be able to flush that out a little bit.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief. I just want to check in with Policy Analyst Mario. Do we have confirmation that the email was sent on Friday? And if not,
yes.
I'd like to. Okay, it was sent. All right, thank you. And at that, and Policy Analyst Arlo, I believe, is that your title? Is that? Or what do I call you?
A strategic planning and accountability manager, and they're calling me spam for short around here. So
that's what I thought that was going to be, spam. Well, spam.
Spa manager, yeah.
The spa manager, yeah. Either way, I look forward to working with you. I'm going to have some questions for you. I'd like to, in a more evolved way, sit down and see if you can put them in writing and respond. And I look forward to seeing what we can do together and create some real policy here in Berkeley.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm very open to those conversations, or if you ever want to sit down and get coffee.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. All right, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for Deputy Chief Tate?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. So if we do vote on this report today, should we just expect to hear your response from it in the next meeting? Or do you have a thought about that?
It is lengthy, so I think we will do our very best to try to have something. That's about all I can offer.
Okay, all right. I just want to clarify. Thanks.
Yep.
Right. With that being said, thank you so much, Deputy Chief and Arlo, and we will keep moving along in our agenda.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. So that takes us to agenda item number 10, subcommittee reports. And Jose, if we could just run down the subcommittees and see who has anything to report, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start with the regulation subcommittee.
No, go ahead.
Board Member Lethbridge and I are continuing to meet with the negotiators, to, sort of formalize and make clear what the PAB's perspective is on various regulations before they go, and we will be at the table too with the, union. And so we are working, this week we have 2 meetings with them. Last week we had 2, and it's going at a pretty slow but rapid pace, I want to say. Steady but slow.
That's fair.
Okay, fair and impartial policing implementation.
Well, that report was sent forward to council, and, I am hoping at some point we will have a conversation with council about that.
Okay, surveillance technology, I don't believe there's been any recent activity. Okay, policies and practices relating to the downtown task force and bike unit allegations.
And that's tonight.
Yeah. Body worn camera policy.
We will resume our focus on that after we complete the work around the vehicle pursuits policy. But just one thing to note under BDP reps, that Captain Okies and Lieutenant Cummings should be listed there. But you can keep going.
Okay, we will make sure to update the record. Conflict of interest subcommittee activity. And then we did skip over the policy complete review. There's the policy review subcommittee with the vehicle pursuits policy.
Yeah, just quickly, we're continuing to work very hard on that, and definitely appreciate the collaboration with the department. It's just invaluable to work with the department on our policy work. And as far as the that same column, BDP reps, so we're working with Deputy Chief Tate and Sergeant Spielman. But I think we weren't really clear, the board wasn't clear whether the policy reviews committee, whether, and I haven't asked the deputy chief about this, whether they will be the rep and then perhaps assign things out if there are other experts, subject matter experts within the department. But certainly for what we're doing now, we're working with Deputy Chief Tate and Sergeant Spielman.
Okay, noted. Budget and metrics.
I'll say that appreciate Board Member Wilson taking a first draft at some metrics that I'm revising and getting her feedback on, with our intent to bring it back to the board in a meeting or 2 for discussion.
Thank you. Outreach and engagement.
I'd say here, policy analyst Murillo, if I think we need to catch up a little bit on commendations, so I might work with you on a second batch of the potential ones so that the chair and I can review them and come back.
Yes.
And also, I think it was our intent to schedule a meeting with staff to plan maybe a fall outreach event of some kind, or, anyway, we need to do a little planning of our next community outreach opportunity to present some of these reports and share them with the public. And we just need to get a meeting scheduled with the relevant stakeholders to figure that out.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Do we have one such community meeting scheduled? We discussed it at the last meeting at Hope.
The Hope Center.
The Hope Center, so that is scheduled.
Yes, that's
Okay.
scheduled.
And are you working on that now? Okay.
Yeah, but my understanding that's a more limited, I don't mean limited, I think there's more we could do beyond, because that's a meeting that they've asked for in the past. That has a kind of a more particular agenda.
Okay.
Anyway, I just think there's more we could be doing, and maybe it's just starting to go on our front foot a little bit about.
Okay, because I think what we discussed whenever we discussed this was potentially broadening the scope, like
Got
to
it.
not waste that opportunity.
Okay.
To.
Because my understanding from Jose was the attendance is more limited to people at that facility.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like an opportunity to invite a bunch of people to a meeting and talk about it. So I think we need something else like that where we could, reach out to members of the press, reach out to broader members of the public and invite more participation.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
Thank you. Off-duty conduct?
Nothing to report.
Okay, operations and processes?
Have you received something from me?
No, I have not.
Oh, then I need to resend it. I did send to board member Rose, but you didn't receive it. Finally, a draft of the proposed process for policy reviews that takes into account board member Cayetano's proposal as well as our discussion at our planning retreat. So I will find that and resend it to you.
Check, see if it-
Okay. Okay, I sent it to the city of Berkeley email.
Oh, you did.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Chair, those are all of our.
Can I say something on the early intervention system?
Mhm.
As you heard, like Arlo and I met to push forward the implementation of the early intervention system. I probably will have more to say about it when we discuss the report. But this is the easy part where we are just pushing out an RFP. We have to get a designation from finance department and then approval from the city council. And it seems like all of that will be done by September. Then we send out the RFP in September. And it seems like this entire process will be finalized, selected by November-ish. And then after that, we have to then work with the union on implementing and changing the policy to reflect the new system. So that will be work in November time. But we are having an initial meeting with Officer Valle, who's the head of the BPA, and Arlo next week, I believe. So that's my report on that.
Thank you. And Chair, that would be it for the subcommittees.
Excellent. That takes us to agenda item number 11. This is our new business and new business A. And I am going to give the floor over to Board Member Calavita so she can discuss the Bike Downtown Task Force report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First, let me say that this investigation was meant to be an independent investigation with the PAB, by the PAB into the texting allegations. And at the beginning, we thought of our investigation as running parallel to the Swanson and McNamara investigation, and that it would be an independent investigation of policies and practices. And as a courtesy, a copy was sent over to the police department on Friday, but this was not one of those instances where we expected to go back and forth and reach some kind of consensus about things. This was our independent investigation. And that said, I do anticipate that when this goes before council with whatever revisions have to be made as a result of today's discussion, I expect that the PAB and maybe the policy subcommittee, maybe the downtown task force subcommittee, I don't know, will collaborate with the department on hammering out and finalizing details of the particular department policies that we propose here. Okay, so the policies that we're recommending here are our best stab at what would be good policy changes. But I just wanted to correct any idea that this was some kind of a consensus product. It's an independent investigation by the PAB subcommittee and ultimately the full board. So let me bear with me because I have a little presentation that I want to do. I know that not everybody has had a chance to read every word of this rather lengthy report. Let me begin the discussion by giving you a little bit of background. So it's been about 20 months since the city of Berkeley was shaken by revelations that egregious text messages were sent among members of the Berkeley Police Department. Remember that former officer Corey Shadowdy claimed that the downtown task force and bike unit that he was part of in 2019 and 2020 had exchanged text messages that were racist and disdainful of unhoused. He also claimed that Sergeant Darren Kaselek, who had sent most of the messages, pressured the unit's officers to meet arrest quotas. One text that he sent was a reposting of a racist message about turning in his, quote, white privilege card, unquote, which the posting said, hasn't done a damn thing for me. No welfare checks, no inheritance, no free college, no free food, no free housing, etc. I may even be willing to trade it in for a race card, unquote. The messages also spoke to the abundance of discretionary overtime. For example, one reported that Lieutenant Reese told him, if you just kick ass, I'll never jam you up about overtime. Another read that a downtown task force officer is going to come back with a new strain that wipes out the homeless population, and we'll just ride by the bodies. Another said, I'm going to come with a bike force board game. You do shit around the city to go forward. I'll come up with a cool award for the winner. Famous people arrested, you get extra points. Several messages alluded to a pressure to make 100 arrests a month. Sergeant Kaselek wrote, how's Operation 100 going? And I was thinking, whoever gets the least arrests today does the waxing. These text messages shocked the community and many of its leaders, including members of the PAB. The nonpartisan group, the Center for Policing Equity, which the city of Berkeley had hired several years ago to do a study on racial disparities in Berkeley policing, wrote that they were, quote, appalled by what they said was, quote, the vile dehumanization of the unhoused and openly racist texts. Because Shadowdy claimed that Chief Lewis knew about the behavior when she was a captain, her appointment to permanent chief was temporarily postponed. The law firm Swanson and McNamara was hired to do an investigation and concluded its inquiry about a year ago. Its findings weren't made public except that forensics authenticated the texts. This lack of transparency added to the public distrust. Making matters worse, a city spokesperson declared that the Swanson team found no racial bias nor any arrest quotas in the department, a statement that went far beyond Swanson's actual findings, which were narrowly tailored to the downtown task force. And even in that case, the spokesperson's summary was a stretch. At the same time, Mayor Arreguín said that whatever other findings there were, quote, what is clear from a plain reading of the text is that the behavior was unprofessional. And this episode further demonstrates the need to implement reforms, unquote. So more detail about that background can be found in the report that you have, but let me move on now to the PAB task. Right after the allegations were revealed, the PAB convened a subcommittee to do an investigation with former board member Cheryl Owens as chair and PAB chair Moore and me as members. When Cheryl resigned, I became chair. According to the city attorney's interpretation of our powers, we weren't allowed to investigate potential misconduct, but instead we're limited to doing a policy and practices review. And so that's what we've done. Because the Swanson team was doing a misconduct investigation parallel to our review, at first we thought we could collaborate, maybe even sit in on Swanson's interviews or ask some questions of our own. This was denied us. We then spent a lot of time requesting access to crucial documentation. You can read in the report about the challenges to access and how we tried to, and in some cases did, overcome them. But to make a long story short, after many months, too many months, the subcommittee and eventually the full board were allowed to view the Swanson report and to listen to the audio taped interviews of the downtown task force officers. Our report ultimately drew on many sources of data. the authenticated text messages, the Swanson report, the audio taped interviews, stop and arrest data by race and across town time, a comparison of those data from the department as a whole, disposition patterns for downtown task force arrests, and department policies in 9 areas. Here's what we found, in addition to the heinous text messages. First, the average number of downtown task force arrests in the period October 2019 to November 2020, which is when the messages were sent, far exceeded department averages. There was a wide range even within the downtown task force, with one officer making 6 arrests that year and another making 228. Furthermore, the arrests peaked in November 2019, just as officers were being pressured to meet 100 arrests a month. About equal numbers of Black people and white people were arrested in that period, and over time, the racial disparity has grown dramatically. More than 20% of these arrests were for violating a court order, for example, probation conditions or a stay-away order. The stay-away orders were a focus of a lot of discussion in the officers' interviews as they talked of arresting folks for violations of orders to stay away from UC property or particular downtown businesses, or even entire blocks of downtown. Several aspects of these stay-away orders are interesting. One is that the police can and do recommend to a judge that an individual be issued a stay-away order, which apparently can make future arrests of that person easier. More about that later. Another finding is that the dismissal rate of these downtown task force arrests in this period, that is the decline of the DA to pursue them, was particularly high. We also found that officers were often confused about what the relevant policies were. For example, about stay-away orders, whether or not they had discretion in enforcing them, and how to report misconduct by a colleague. Finally, and perhaps most strikingly to me anyway, interview officers rejected any reading of the text as racist, disdainful, or as pushing arrest quotas. Instead, they mostly dismissed them as jokes. The rest of our report focuses on recommendations for changes to the fair and impartial policing policy, policies on the use of personal cell phones, employee speech, the early warning system, standards of conduct, overtime compensation, a prohibition on all types of arrest quotas, and stay-away order enforcement. Our report also urges City Council to pass an ordinance or otherwise affirm the PAB's ability to launch robust investigations on our own. The ordinance would include the ability of the PAB to access internal police department documents and records consistent with our understanding of the charter amendment, creating the PAB as an empowered oversight body. There's other recommendations for City Council action, but this is the one that's most critical to the PAB's ability to fulfill its functions and duties as enumerated in 125 of the city charter. Given the importance of this, the subcommittee would like to request a special meeting of City Council to receive this report, which we believe is critical to police oversight in the city. In that meeting, we would propose that council vote to acknowledge our report and accept our recommendations for reform, with the understanding that the PAB would collaborate with the police department to finalize our policy recommendations. I personally am not asking that special meeting involve a back and forth between our presentation and the police department. I would expect that it would be our presentation of our report. Tonight, I'm asking for a discussion of our subcommittee report, and if appropriate, I'll then make a motion that the report be approved and sent forward to council. So I will.
Thank you, Board Member Calvita. Would someone like to start the discussion?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. First, I just want to thank you for this excellent report. Really outstanding. I had a few thoughts, few suggestions. The first, I did read it through and just caught some very minor punctuation, capitalization things that I can just email you about. But substantively, one thing I thought it would be helpful to add to the executive summary would be to reference the obstacles to accessing internal records that you discuss on pages 14 and 15, because I think it's really important to highlight those. And some people, unfortunately, will only read the executive summary, so whatever you really want people to take away, you should include there. The other thing is regarding the specific policy recommendations, there are 6 of them. And I would just propose that the language be tweaked a bit so that perhaps it could say something like our preliminary recommendations subject to further analysis and input from the department or something, because I didn't have time to look at all 6 of those policies. And I just don't want it to be written in stone. We propose this and that's it. So if there's some way just to kind of soften that, I think that would be an easy thing to do. Just so we aren't boxing ourselves in about what those recommendations are. And then the final question, one of the recommendations is to encourage state legislators to extend the arrest quotas prohibition. And I'm just wondering what mechanism, I mean, I don't know if the city does that, how that would work. City obviously doesn't, I mean, I don't think they ever propose state legislation. They might sponsor it, I don't know. But so I would appreciate some clarification if you know about how that might work.
Thank you for that. Yes, I totally agree about adding that, a brief note about the obstacles in the executive summary and also some wording about how these are preliminary recommendations for the department policies. Absolutely. I believe there, and I don't know for sure, somebody else might know more about the precise mechanism through which the council can communicate with state legislators about, I believe there is, because I believe I've read somewhere.
There is.
Yeah.
Our mayor has done this multiple times in the realm of housing. So we've sponsored state legislation in housing and work with the homeless before as a city.
Yeah, and ODPA staff has presented to us on the fact that we have a lobbyist.
Yeah.
There's a very established mechanism for.
Right, well, lobbyists would usually lobby in favor of an opposition to a particular bill. And
No,
this is
they also advocate for positions. They find somebody to sponsor a bill for you.
Oh, okay, that
Yeah.
I didn't understand if they looked for legislative.
It's my understanding they do
Okay.
that, but I just wanted to actually, since you mentioned this in the context of arrest quotas, and this is in the report, but I didn't mention it in my little presentation here. And that is that most people think already there is a prohibition on arrest quotas in the penal code. And it's just not right. It's in the vehicle code. There's a prohibition on quotas of traffic stops and fines and citations and so forth. But there's nothing elsewhere about, and so if it is meant to be elsewhere, then it should be explicitly. And so I think that's something that our city could take be proactive on, and it's come up in this context. Meantime, we need to put it in our policy.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll also just echo Board Member Leftwich's admiration for the quality of this report. I mean, I think that the thoroughness is evident, and I expect it to be adopted. I spent quite a bit of time going through the Swanson report and reading the report that we released here, and do just want to sort of clarify a couple of things and make a couple of comments. So I think that in large part, I think that the conclusions that are drawn here are are correct. But similar to our conversation with the fair and impartial policing, I'm worried about the broader context. We heard earlier from a press release, that this report affirms racism within the police force, and this report affirms quotas within the police force. My review of the evidence, and I think to a good extent that this report does not reach that level of conclusion. I think it very clearly affirms racist text messages from individuals within the police force and biased text messages from individuals in the police force, and I think rightfully recommends changes to those policies. When it comes to the question of quotas, I'm not as convinced by the evidence that is the reality. And I think the one thing that I see as missing from this report is the context of the establishment of the downtown task force and the state of downtown Berkeley in 2019, when it was a failure of council to successfully ensure that the businesses in downtown and the community in downtown felt like they had a safe environment in which to live and work. And I think that the difference between an effort to, for lack of a better term, clean up downtown, the efforts to improve that community, and the measurement of that success by number of arrests becomes a nuanced question. I think that, again, all of the policy recommendations in there make sense. We shouldn't be in using quotas. That does not make sense for us to arrest people in order to meet quotas. But I also want to be clear that we do want police to find ways to in some cases, take aggressive action to help communities that feel under siege and businesses that can no longer function and feel like they have no recourse other than police intervention when there is no action by council to take any better approach at the time. So I did just want to sort of make that comment that I do think the conclusion that quotas were used is too far and is not made in this report, to be clear. I do think that this report would benefit from that broader context of why the downtown task force was initially established. But other than that, again, I agree with every one of the policy recommendations that were made in this report. I think that they all are common sense, and I think that the bulk of the report is very much it.
Any other comments? If not, I'm gonna ask for a motion.
No.
Sorry, we still have a few comments, Chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, didn't see. It's hard to see.
Trying to pull it up. So I sent you my comments, Kitty, and I agree it's really well written. And I have just some, I think, comments about like some of the charts. I'm not sure they're that helpful if they don't include comparative data. At this point, I recognize all the hard work that's gone into this. So I think it's your call if you make any of those changes. I don't necessarily feel like I need to go over them. But what I do want to talk about is this question of whether or not we have the authority to monitor implementation. We heard a comment about this during public comment as well. What I believe that we believe that we do have this authority now. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So why do we feel like we need counsel to do anything with respect to that particular issue?
It's not so much with regard to implementation, although I guess it indirectly is, but it's about getting access to documents that are not necessarily subsequent to an individual complaint, because currently the interpretation of the city attorney is, as I understand it, that we can only get internal documentation if an individual complaint has been filed. And that's not, I believe, common sense reading of the charter amendments, let me put it that way. Which gives us access to all city documents. And so I would ask simply that the city council affirm that access. That's what that recommendation is about.
Okay.
Because we cannot, and we do absolutely have authority to monitor implementation. I mean, we were directed to monitor the implementation of the fair and impartial policing activity, and therefore, yes, we absolutely do have that, but we cannot do it in the absence of access to documents.
Okay, all right. Another question I wanted to ask, there's a recommendation basically that we create kind of a whistleblower complaint process, but where we're requiring officers to report on one another. That's one of your recommendations. And what I wanted to know, and maybe our VPD representative can answer this, is this common in police departments? Is it?
I don't know what common is, but it is the case, for example, in San Francisco.
It is in the policy currently for them to report misconducts.
Okay, so that isn't new, because that's red line.
It's in the policy.
Okay.
They're at the policy.
Which policy?
I can find it if you want to.
It's not in any of the policies that we examine, like standards of conduct and very impartial policing. It talks about supervisors being responsible, but we did not find it anywhere explicit that ordinary officers without being supervisors can, I mean, if you, yeah.
Yeah, I'll find the exact reference. I asked Lieutenant Rittenhouse, who I'm working with on the off-duty conducts subcommittee, about this, and he said they are under an affirmative duty to report instances of misconduct, which is what I was going to talk on more when I spoke about the draft. But I can find the exact thing in the policy. But I do think it's worth underlining.
Yeah.
Because it's not currently being implemented.
And I have to say, without, it's a little bit difficult to do this presentation because we were allowed access to officer interviews, but we're not allowed to quote from them, for example. But there is, let me just put it this way, there's confusion in that realm.
Okay. So I think it would be helpful, maybe Board Member Lethwich's suggestion that we just explicitly indicate that these policy proposals are drafts will cover this, because if in fact there already is a policy on mandated reporting, then I think we would want to tweak the way this is articulated here. All right. There's recommendations on EWS included in this report. And I'm just questioning if now is the right time to change the EWS process. I agree that what we're getting now is not particularly worthwhile. I share that concern, but I know we're in the middle of launching this whole new EWS initiative, and just in recognition of limited bandwidth of both the department and us, I just don't know if it's the best use of time to try to modify the EWS process right now. So I think those are the my comments are the only point I would make now.
Can I ask Board Member Cayetano, how long do we have in a drag between now and when the EWS will be implemented?
5 months.
5 months.
End of the calendar year.
Gotcha.
Well, implementation is a different question, actually. Implementation.
Okay, that's the big one.
Yeah. Initiation, 5 months. Implementation will depend on how we work together with them to come to a consensus on what the or how quickly council can help us on that.
I would be curious
So-
about your feeling, the impact of this language on the EWS process.
Yeah, I mean, it will be overwritten by whatever whatever comments we
course.
have on early warning system. And I will want to say, like, whatever early intervention system we implement needs to be able to pick up the type of misconduct that is at issue here. And if it doesn't, it's ineffective. I mean, that's my opinion. So this is a good lesson that we should be focusing on when we're doing that process as well. The council should be focusing on.
And in my experience, I would like to keep the recommendation in place in case there is something that goes offline with the EWS implementation or anything along those lines. You know, we still don't have regulations. We're 4 years in. So if that's a model, I think we should go ahead and have something withstanding and ready to go.
A few comments again. Thank you to Board Member Calavita for all the work. Thank you to Chair Moore. Thank you to staff for helping pull all this together. I just had a couple of substantive questions and one formatting question. One, just to dig back into the ordinance and the request of council. The way I'm also reading that first bullet, it's not just about access to internal records, but also the sua sponte ability to initiate investigations. And that is additive, right? Because my read is we don't think we can do that currently.
We cannot.
Policy review. Sua sponte.
Yeah, we can do.
Okay, so I think it's just to clarify and maybe, anyway, so I see that as a broader ask and an ordinance may be appropriate in some of that, like the access to data or records, maybe not so much, but the full authorization to conduct investigations that we see fit, maybe broad, anyway, I don't, so that the way I read that may require some sort of ordinance or clarification from council, but so that's one point. And that is consistent with other oversight bodies like ours, right? I mean, we're not asking for anything that's different than what other accountability boards have. And so I think that's also important. We're not going beyond the scope of what normal oversight bodies have. So I think that's important context there. To the second bullet, asking them to adopt a resolution affirming the importance, was there any interest to go stronger than resolution? Was there anything else that we could move that would be even stronger than a resolution that you would seek? I mean, is there anything else that we've asked council to do other than just affirm the importance of that accountability, or is there a policy change we're asking them to make? May not be, but that was just a question that as I was reading that bullet, I think the resolution is important, but if there was something with more teeth that we were asking for, that would also be an opportunity. So I thought about that. And then third, one section above on the BPD policies and practices, the third bullet, increasing training on BPD policies and state law, feels, again, very broad. And if there was any, again, specific areas that we were thinking about training on policies and state law in certain areas, because that felt like a very big statement. And so if there was any other context there that would sort of direct that in terms of the areas of training we were looking a little more, I thought that would be useful. And my last comment, which is more a formatting comment and a request maybe for staff in future reports. I think it would be super useful if the executive summary and the order of the recommendations and then the body that follows it sort of lined up. One thing I kind of felt as I was flipping back and forth, I was sort of reading recommendations and looking for the detail, and the order didn't always line up. So just from helping people read it and digest it and be able to move back and forth, the formatting request would just be to help align the order of the recommendations and putting them in the same order as the report. So it's easier to kind of.
And maybe make the executive summary more separate, because I kept thinking, am I still in the executive summary?
Yeah.
You know, you can maybe have that more of a standalone.
Yeah, something about, yeah, because I would kind of look for that particular data on that particular recommendation. I kind of kept losing my track. And so I think there's probably an easier way just to line those up so that the recommendations at the top and then the more detailed discussion are in the same order. But otherwise, I thank you for the work. I strongly support what you're recommending here, but just some comments for context and elucidation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the section that talks about an officer's affirmative duty to report is in 10.8.
It's pretty broad, right? It's really, if my understanding of.
What does it say?
Go ahead.
trying to find the language. I have it written down. I have it summarized in my notes, but the manual that I have doesn't include it. 1010. It's not the up-to-date one right now. But if anyone has a manual on them,
Do you know what's the policy about?
I'm trying to find that too.
Yeah, good. We didn't find it in any of the policies we were doing, so
I mean,
if it's there, we should highlight it, yeah.
I agree. Can I make some comments? But I just have a couple comments. One, thank you so much for your report. I know you worked so hard on this against many obstacles from within and without. I will say, just like on the surface level, that I think that the title should be changed. I don't think that these are allegations.
We worked hard on the title.
Yeah, I don't think that they're allegations any longer.
What do you call it?
I call it misconduct. I mean,
We're not investigating misconduct.
I don't think this is an I mean, like, this is an investigation, but it's not like a personnel investigation. Like, this is about, I don't know what you want to call it beyond the allegations, but I mean, like, you're showing evidence of text messages that directly report what you're referring to. So it's no longer an allegation at that point.
That's scandal.
I mean, scandal is something that the newspaper would write about. I think that there's something that,
I went and so I'm officially in receipt of all of your suggestions for the title.
Yeah.
We went back and forth a lot.
That's just my.
It was tough. The title was not easy, guys.
I agree with you. It's not allegations, but what is it? All right.
Yeah, I also I was thinking of what Board Member Wilson brought up because, the officer that reported, I mean, he kind of fell on his own sword in this instance to report. And I think that our reaction, our interpretation of what happened would not have been the same interpretation or reaction if this was handled internally, which sort of shows the purpose of civilian oversight in the first place. And you can see how this plays out systemically when all of our interpretations of misconduct are overturned by the chief and then by the former city manager. And so I think this really I think there is a bigger picture here, and I think that is the bigger picture as well. So I fully agree with all the recommendations about empowering us to do what the charter said we should do. I do think that it's, I'm of two minds, again, with asking the council to do something that I think we already have the power to do. And I think we already have the power to do it because we've exercised that power and it's been responded to. I mean, it was exercised in this instance when we subpoenaed them for the different text messages and Swanson report, et cetera. So part of me worries that by asking for something that we already have and at risk of it being denied, then that door will be closed to us. I don't know how to judge the politics of that, but I'm just saying for the record, as I've said, since, I came on the board, that I think that this board has that power and that we've been exercising it. So that's why I'm, thoughtful about this recommendation to council. And I think there should be at least an acknowledgement that in the report that we do currently have this authority, but it's been frustrated and undermined and frankly usurped by different people, by different institutions. So I think that, that's my gloss on that section there. And then the specific policies that you highlighted, I think have a lot of intersection with the policies that I've been working on. Like, for example, the off-duty conduct subcommittee has worked on the standards of misconduct 352 with Lieutenant Rittenhouse. And, there's been a lot of frustration because the policies are vague and not specific. And, what brings discredit to the department? It's hard to enforce that policy when it's the word is like capacious enough to include or exclude anything, as I said, a few months ago. And so I think that, so for like the policy 321 standards, there needs to be, I don't know, like a better way of identifying the misconduct that is occurring as misconduct beyond something beyond what the policy currently says. So I think that the policy right now is inadequate. I don't have a specific solution or proposal. But I do think that placing officers under an affirmative duty to report won't do much if they don't know what they're reporting or they're too scared to report it. I mean, like, not everyone will risk getting fired or get fired in order to report misconduct internally. So I think that, and I mean, the sergeant who responded on page 60, or the officer who responded, he said, takes guts to do what you just did. And that's just an internal message. So I think that that we should think carefully about what it means to impose on officers an affirmative duty to report in the policy. And even though I'm behind it, I think that we need to expect them to report, like, are they reporting just to internal investigations? Like, what is our role in that? If their role is just reporting to internal, it's just going to get wrapped up in the same system that this could have got wrapped up if the city council didn't set that in the first place. And so for early intervention, I think that there's also overlap here. I already said what I had to say on that. Yeah, those are my comments. Thank you.
Jose, if you could be my eyes, is there any other comments?
Moses?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the one open question before we move forward with voting as to whether it makes sense to include the EWS language here or not. And I'm curious, just from your read of the situation, are we currently moving in the right direction and better not to rock the boat, given that we have cooperation and are actively moving towards a new solution as opposed to overriding the language in here as Vice Chair Wilson mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, that was the question that Board Member Lefkovich asked, like, are we making suggestions? Are we saying these are proposals? If it's just proposal, I mean, like, that's okay. But what I was saying is that it will be overwritten regardless if we suggest it or propose it, because the policy has to be reworked in order to accommodate whatever system is implemented in the future, because the current policy is written for the current system. Got it. So I don't know how effective it'll be. It's okay to make a suggestion.
It feels to me like if we indicate that all this is draft for further discussion and working through the normal policy process, there's still a chance that some of those enhancements will still make its way through the policy even after some of it's been overwritten, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah, but the policies or the language that was suggested was pretty modest.
Yeah, the language that's suggested is modest, and knowing how slowly these things move.
Right.
It will be a while before a full-fledged new early intervention and risk management system is constructed, much less implemented for the city.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, two things could be fixed here
Totally.
that could be put into effect pretty fast.
Yeah, so I would support keeping it with the kind of context we had, which is these are not completely set in stone, but these are some proposed language that we're going to work through in our normal, right? Is that?
Yeah,
Your support? Yeah,
that's what I envision.
Yeah, I support that, Board Member Kelly. So I would say keep it.
I do. So are we asking the council to direct the department to implement these policy changes, or are we asking them to work with us on?
To work with us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all we're asking council is to pass the ordinance that we had suggested, a resolution about the importance of accountability, direct the city manager. By the way, we haven't even talked about this repository of information, which I think is great, because we don't have access to that, and it's fantastic. And then fourth is to encourage state legislators to extend the prohibition on press corps. So we're not even asking the council to act on any of these specific policy things, because we have our own mechanism for doing that.
Right. So I could make a motion.
Can I say one more thing before you make a motion? I just wanted to thank the members of the public who came here to speak. I know this is the board members' first meeting, but this is the most amount of public speakers that I've been hearing. And maybe, I don't know how many will come in the future, but I think that your input is invaluable. And I think that I would encourage you to continue to make noise on this and to go to when we go to council. So thank you.
Board Member Calvita?
I just restate the wording of my last sentences in this presentation I did. The PAB would request a special meeting of city council to receive the report in that meeting, we would propose that council vote to acknowledge our report and accept our recommendations for reform with an understanding that the PAB will collaborate with the police department to finalize our policy recommendations.
I would just want to make a friendly amendment to give board member Calavita the authority to make technical amendments to the report.
Yeah, and I will make the changes that people have
As
suggested.
consistent with the discussion at the board meeting today.
So the motion is just vote to approve the report and ask for the meeting.
The special meeting.
And to delegate to her the authority to make amendments.
And I'll just also make a friendly amendment or ask, is there any interest in including some background on the establishment of the downtown task force in 2019?
Not from my perspective. I don't know that that would add, it would just lengthen the report. I should say that there's no, in fact, here it is, July 10th. I bet this won't happen until September. Because of the August recess.
And I would just say I'm sympathetic to you, to your concern, because I do worry sometimes that we're so, we're constantly very critical of the department. And that at some point, I'm not sure how productive it is. However, in this case, I don't know if the context matters. Like downtown, it's still terrible. Does that justify those kinds of text messages? No. So I don't know that the context in this instance, it doesn't matter. So that's why I'm not really supportive in this particular instance, but I'm sort of sympathetic to the overall sentiment. But
And I do think to that point, like there's a challenge in a very clear and egregious racist text message narrative. And I think a less clear narrative around quotas that I worry gets confounded. So to your point, I wouldn't want to muddle that question from the perspective of the need for better early intervention systems, the need for updating of policies for off-duty conduct, et cetera. But also within this report is this point about quotas that I worry becomes a deterrent to any attempts to make downtown less terrible.
okay.
In any case, I agree with the vice chair that in this instance, it sort of isn't relative to the main issue here.
Yeah.
Relevant.
And for some of us, like for me, I thought there was sufficient evidence of evidence, not in a legal sense, but enough that I got a flavor for they're trying to hit certain targets.
Right.
There was an
And it was
expectation,
uncomfortable.
so it's a semantic issue, whether you want to call it a quote.
Yeah, I saw expectations, pressure, more or less explicit, perhaps informal, seemingly jocular. So I mean, no, so you just, so I feel like you described the sense of it, because it wasn't saying like the chief saying, here's the quota, hit it. There was this sort of informal sense among the members that we needed the expectation to hit certain numbers. So I was comfortable with the characterization.
And what was striking was that the data on arrests by month lined up perfectly with when those statements were being made. Suddenly there was a spike in arrests at that exact month, and then things fell away.
But I think we have a motion on the floor.
We do. But no second
Complicated,
so
isn't it?
far.
But we haven't had a second.
I'll second it.
Sorry, for the record, could we just repeat the motion?
Oh.
It's the motion that's outlined in the.
Yeah, the PAB requests a special meeting of city council to receive the report entitled XYZ, which we will, in that meeting, we would propose that council vote to acknowledge our report and accept our recommendations for reform with an understanding that the PAB will collaborate with the police department to finalize our policy recommendations. Yeah.
And part of that, as I understand it, is we're also approving the report tonight with Board Member Calavita's opportunity to make technical amendments. So it's all of that, right?
As per our discussion, they're not all technical, but.
Sorry.
Can we
you're right.
get a second? We're all on the same page. Let's land this plane. We got this. 20 months in the making.
Okay, I'll now proceed to the roll call vote. Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Sorry, that was emphatic.
Motion carries.
Can I ask if there's gonna be a press release issued or some?
Should be.
We should have some public statement, where we characterize our own publication.
We have historically released public statements throughout the course when we initiated it. We gave an update last year, so if the board welcomes it, staff could facilitate another press release.
Yeah, I think the wording is gonna be very important, so maybe you could work with Board Member Calavita on that.
Chair, can I have your leave to read the policy that we were looking for really quickly?
Please.
Okay,
Please
so
do.
it's 1010 personnel complaints. That's what the title of the section in the manual is. 1010.9 reads, when an employee who is not a supervisor becomes aware or observed what he/she believes to be possible misconduct by another department employee, he/she shall, by the end of the employee's current shifts, or if off duty within 24 hours, notify a supervisor, or in the absence of a supervisor, a command officer. However, serious allegations, including but not limited to a list of different things, including discrimination, shall be reported immediately. And if required by the supervisor, a written report documenting the alleged misconduct shall be made by the reporting employee initiating the complaint. So I think that there's some material to work with there, but it's not like, I think that there are some difficulties there, like what happens if the person you're reporting is your supervisor, like in this instance. You know, and how are those complaints dealt with internally versus externally?
And that's number 1010.
1010.9. That can be a subject for future conversation.
Yeah, but we have to.
Most government agencies have a whistleblower policy. I saw the city auditor has that, I think, as part of their work plan for 2025. And you could use, I mean, there should be a mechanism, I'm sure, for law enforcement with the California State Auditor, somebody.
Yeah, but whistleblower is different than making it a requirement that you report misconduct. You know,
Right, but if it's a requirement, you can also say report it through this chain, which is an independent.
I think this will be a great conversation for another time, but why don't we move on? New business, B, discussion and action on the PAB Policy Review Subcommittee's proposal to submit a Public Records Act request to the California Highway Patrol for vehicle pursuit data submitted by the BPD. Board Member Leftwich, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. And I can make this pretty quick. The vehicle pursuits policy review, during our preliminary conversations with the department, we asked for some basic information and data, you know, the number of vehicle pursuits, what the outcome of those pursuits was, and we were told that the data they have includes that they need to submit a form to the CHP of vehicle pursuits, the 187A form. But the department keeps separate failure to stop, failure to yield reports, and they're all commingled apparently, so they were not able to just give us the CHP forms of vehicle pursuits. And so they told us that we would need to do a PRA request for that information. And it seems pretty basic to us that they should be keeping track of their vehicle pursuits, so that will be included in the policy that we're going to be recommending. So the request is just that the board approve the request from our policy review subcommittee to submit a PRA request to the CHP, seeking all CHP 187 forms submitted by the BPD and relevant data sets for the past 10 years. So I'm not sure, I mean, I don't know what data sets, I don't know if they've done reports. The annual report that the CHP does just says the number of pursuits, how many people died, that sort of thing, but they don't do it by city. So I'm hoping that they can give us something rather than just giving us tons of these forms. I don't know what they will give us. I've done PRA requests in the past, but not recently. So I don't know if that's something that I guess we could work with staff on submitting that? I know there's some statute we would need to refer to or something.
Yes, staff could assist with that request.
I'll make a motion to move this item. Prove it.
Second.
Okay, proceed to the vote. Board Member Blackerby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, that takes us to agenda item C, discussion and action on a proposal to systematize board training as authorized by section 125.12 of the Berkeley City Charter.
For this.
Jose?
Yeah, again, this is an item that the board had previously requested. Unfortunately, Director Aguilar in the office wasn't anticipating to not be present today, so we weren't able to provide you with the materials we had said we would provide. So we kindly request that the board could table the item so that we could provide you that update at a future meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So on the motion to table the item, I'll just go through a quick roll call vote. Board Member Blackerby.
Yes.
Board Member Calavita.
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano.
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich.
Yes.
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
Board Member Williams.
Yes.
Chair Moore
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. So item 11B is another one of our items. So in the memorandum that we provided around the military equipment report, we bring this to your attention in the case that the board wants to take any action or make any further recommendation to the council. As we noted in our memorandum, the board has already reviewed the controlled equipment report, which is a requirement of BMC 2100. The report, or that report, is very similar to the military equipment report, except that, of course, under the military equipment report, the reporting recommendations are slightly less. Our ordinance requires both deployments and use versus the state's requirement only requires instances of use. The board isn't necessarily required to provide approval for this report. But the reason we bring this to you is because the statute that enables the military equipment report has a specific requirement that, and was also mentioned in public comment, about the BPD hosting a community session where members of the public have the opportunity to ask about specific equipment or have specific questions in terms of their usage. So we just bring that to your attention if the board wants to make any recommendations. Again, you're not the governing body for AB 481, so there isn't necessarily a mandatory need for you to provide an opinion, but we bring this in terms of your oversight capacity. If there was any comments you would like to provide to council or any recommendations you'd like to make.
So your recommendation is that we recommend to council to recommend or to direct BPD to hold this community meeting that they're required to do. Is that correct? Clarifying everything? Okay. I agree with that.
I don't think it's necessary to make a recommendation. I just see this as unnecessary on our part. Their department is required to do it. So are we making recommendations generally to council about things the department is required to do? I think if the department doesn't do it, we should monitor that and then we should take that up because it's supposed to be done, I believe, within 30 days of the report going to council. So maybe we can make a motion for the department to notice us of when the community meeting is. It just seems odd that we're going to ask council to.
Wasn't this report given to them in February? Or is
It's
that?
just, I was really confused about this versus the use report, but I believe that, this was, I don't know, the date here is July 23rd, the action calendar.
So again, it's the slight distinction. I know there was some confusion when we first discussed the controlled equipment report earlier in the year. So this is, the controlled equipment report is separate from the state requirement. BMC 2100 doesn't require the community meeting, for example, versus the state legislation does specifically list the community session as one of the requirements. So it's going back to council to meet the state deadlines. And again, we're just flagging this for your attention, and if the board decides to take any action on the matter.
So this is we're trying to do some transparency and accountability work here. We're trying to let them know that there's something that they need to do on their calendar. And I believe we didn't do this last year either. So this is us doing something about it this year. Is that fair, Jose?
That's fair, Chair.
Because as I read, there was a PRA for any event since 2022, is that right?
Correct. 2022
That is
is the year
correct.
the legislation first passed.
So it's been 2 years-ish, at least 18 months to 2 years.
This is the second report, yeah.
So they didn't do it for the first report was the issue.
Correct. And part of that interpretation was that the department bringing it to the board was that community input meeting. But for the legislation where it's supposed to require that the law enforcement agency be the one to host it.
Right.
And allow for a period for folks to ask questions. So under those conditions, it's our opinion that we don't believe that meets the requirements.
It doesn't meet the requirements. We are tightening this up. So what we're asking you guys to do is, see, there's a problem here. Can we go ahead as a board, call it out, and see if we can get some resolution?
Only other thing I would ask, just in, again, the context of Vice Chair Wilson, is have we brought this up with the chief directly already? Like, have we talked to folks at the department directly and gotten no response or?
During the PRA request, because our office was assigned to it, we did have discussions, and that's how we came about that there wasn't.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, is there anything wrong with waiting 30 days and then sending this letter? So.
Well, they'll miss their deadline.
Yeah.
Or they won't.
That's what's wrong. We can help now. We can say, hey, this is transparency and accountability, but you guys, we got to hit this right now. Or we let it fall off and then we say, oh, guys, we could have told you, but we didn't.
Okay.
And now we're not aligned with state law. So it's the board's decision. I support you either way.
Okay, well, we have a motion, I think, on the floor. Do we have a second? Or do you want to keep your motion? I think you made the motion.
I didn't make a motion,
Oh, okay.
but I can make the motion.
I'm asking for a motion. I'll ask for one.
Oh, I'll move to submit this. I'll second.
Okay, so now proceed with the roll call vote as soon as I find my list. Okay, here we go. So on the motion to, sorry, just to clarify, to submit the notice to council as staff recommended.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. And that motion moved by Board Member Cayetano, seconded by Board Member Moses. I'll start with Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
No.
So the motion carries.
Okay. So that takes us right back to discussion and action to the introduction of the Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability, the OSPA.
This item, I believe, to my understanding, was originally added in case the board wanted to ask more specific questions or there were more specific action you all wanted to take following the previous meeting. I'm not sure if the context of the section of the meeting earlier where we got a brief presentation of the OS from the spam manager, Malberg, regarding the OSPA, kind of satisfied that and we can move on, or if there's any further action from the board.
I think we can move on. Personally.
I think so too.
So, okay. Are there any objections to moving? Okay. Okay, Chair.
Okay,
so
not
it looks
seeing or
like I'm
hearing any,
gonna-
okay, not seeing or hearing any objections. That brings us to our final public comment of the evening, agenda item number 12.
Okay, so we'll now go ahead to public comment before a closed session. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. I'll start with our speakers who are physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. At this time, is there any public comment from those physically present?
Yes, I'm Edward Upton. I want to compliment the group, the excellent discussion this evening, and especially on the summary that we've heard from Ms. Chaldiga, right? I think it's you've done a terrific job, and look forward to seeing the results of your work.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment from those physically present? Okay, hearing none, and I'll go on to our virtual attendees. Okay, Kit Sajanor, you have been granted permission to speak. As soon as you're ready, we have 3 minutes on the clock.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the discussion. It was very enlightening. There's one thing that was not entirely clear to me, but of course I'm a layperson and I'm sure it is clear to you. And that is in several places, the report talks about the amendment or that it is allowed to disclose records related to, quote, any record relating to an incident in which a sustained finding was made by any law enforcement agency or oversight agency about a peace officer, et cetera, et cetera. And what was not entirely clear to me is, does the finding being sustained mean that it was sustained, for instance, by the PAB, or if it was sustained by the PAB, but then overturned by the city manager, is it no longer considered a sustained finding in the terms of these rules? That was not entirely clear to me. I'm not expecting you to answer that now, and it may be that it does not need to be clarified for the document, but I just thought I would let you know that. You've done a wonderful work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, are there any additional virtual attendees who would like to provide public comment? Again, now's your opportunity to provide public comment if you're attending virtually. Chair, at this time, I see no additional hands raised.
That will take us to agenda item 13, closed session. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight.
Welcome to remain in the webinar, but the recording, video, and audio will stop. We'll be returning to announce closed session actions. Thank you. Sorry, Chair, I'll send you a separate link for you to join.
I thought you would. All good.
Chair, we are back from closed session. The meeting recording is now live.
So this takes us to agenda item number 14, which is closed session findings. And let me be brief when I say our accepted findings in 2023 CI 0019. We voted for a hearing in 2024 in CI 0004 and voted to accept findings for 2024 CI 0014. And with that, I'm going to ask for a motion from one of our members to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Well, seeing or hearing no. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, with that, the meeting has been adjourned at 10 p.m.